Well, good morning, church family. Does it seem more appropriate for me to stand up at this time than how I did last week? I think I caught a lot of you off guard last week, and I apologize for that. There are things like that I've been working on in my head and going, yeah, this is whenever I'm supposed to get up, and we forget maybe to communicate that with the rest of y'all. I even had one of the elders reach out to, I think it was Rusty, reached to Rusty, said, did we skip the Lord's Supper? No, we got covered, but that tells you my communication skills. Even with that, I forgot to let all the elders know what was going on. So buckle in. It's a ride sometimes on Sunday mornings, right? But it is a joy to be here together. For those of you that are joining or have joined us on live stream, we welcome you. We thank you for being a part of this and a part of this community of fellowship together. And even whenever you can't be here physically, on November 14th, 1970, I'm going to say that one of the most devastating tragedies hit the sporting world on that day. If you don't know exactly what happened that day, a plane crashed, killed 75 people, including most of the coaching staff, players, and other supporters of the Marshall University football team. Now, 1970, some of you may remember that. A lot of you may not have even been here for that, but you may have seen the movie with Matthew McConaughey with the title, We Are Marshall. And the movie is about the aftermath. How are they going to rebuild? How are they going to find their identity? What is it going to look like in the aftermath of as a football team whenever that is in your history? What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, the movie portrays that soon after they rallied around a cry that was called, the title of the movie, We Are Marshall. In all reality, that cry, Marshall. This is who we are. And they would define what that meant and what that looks like and what that means. But the rally cry was, this is who we are. I'm convinced that identity is one of the most important things that we need to remember. We need to know who we are. Identity is key for so many things. Because when you define your identity, when you understand who you are, now you can live up to that identity. Because your identity will give you purpose. Your identity gives you meaning. Your identity gives you a path forward. If you don't have an identity, if you don't clearly understand what your identity is, you often get stuck in the way it has been. But identity actually pushes us forward, not just past. It pushes us forward in light of the past. And so as we look forward as a church family here, we got some work to do. You've heard multiple times about the tabernacle experience coming. It's coming, and we will require a lot of work from us, but one of the nice and wonderful benefits, the part of the reason that we wanted to host this event was it gives us a step in the door for a lot of people in our community. And when we have our foot in the door, it is absolutely crucial that we remember who we are. And so in prep for the work before us, I want us to remember the identity that Jesus has already put on every one of us. In one small section in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gives, Matthew 5 through 7, in one small section, he gives us very clear and purposeful identity. And we're going to look at that this morning. Matthew 5, 13 through 16. He starts off saying, You are the salt of the earth. But what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. Jesus reveals our identity, and then he asks us to own up to it. You got to be what you are. So let's break this down and look at it. He first starts by saying, I am salt. He says, you are salt, and this you is the plural. If it was written in the South, it'd be y'all. Y'all are salt, which doesn't sound near as eloquent or nice, so I'm going to stick with you are salt. You are salt, okay? That's what's going on. Before I get into the definition and the understanding of that, I want you to know this is an imperative. He's putting the emphasis here. This is not a question. It's not a question of, would you like to be salt? Hey, would you like things to look a little bit different in your life? Would you like things to have a little bit better purpose and meaning for your life? Often this is how we portray becoming a Christian, is we kind of ask this question of, would you like to, and then fill in the blank. This is an emphatic statement. You're salt. And there's two categories that he has here. One is salt and one is earth. You are the salt of the earth. These are not the same things. The question is not whether you're salt. Whether you're salt or not, you are. The question is, are you going to live in that identity? Are you going to live up to your saltiness? Now, probably ought to put a question mark on there because we have made saltiness kind of a negative thing. That's not what I mean. For someone to be salty and lit is not exactly what Jesus was talking about whenever he said be salt and light. But the idea is living up to what we are called to be. So what is the purpose of salt? Would one just provide flavor? It still does for us. We get that. But also there was a preserving quality for salt. And this was before you had refrigerators, before you had ways of being able to preserve meat. It is quite possible that most of Jesus' followers, or a good chunk of them, had already, even maybe that morning, after gone fishing, they had packed their fish in salt to be able to carry it to the market to be sold so that it wouldn't decay, it wouldn't deteriorate, it wouldn't get bad before being able to be sold. So salt would help preserve what was decaying and dying. You are the salt of the earth. So the idea is the earth without salt decays and dies. And let's be honest, we don't have to look very far into this world to see the decay going on, right? We don't have to look very far. We can look through our political landscape and we can see that the world is deteriorating. When there's less salt, that's what happens. We can look through school systems and see there's decay. We can look through businesses and see the decay. We don't have to look very far in our world to see that things are not going up, they're not going in the right direction. We're going downhill, sometimes faster than what we would like. This world is rotting. But Jesus gives us the command. Go be salt. Help a world that is decaying to not decay so quickly or at all with the help of Jesus. You are salt. Salt has that purpose. Now, salt is actually a very stable compound, chemically speaking. Like, it's actually really hard to break apart salt. That's part of the reason salt is what it is it's actually a really stable compound, chemically speaking, and it's wonderful. So there's an irony to Jesus' statement, his question, well, what happens if salt loses its flavor? What happens if salt isn't salty anymore? The irony is, like, chemically speaking, that can't happen. But Jesus also knows that these people don't know chemistry. At least in the same way that we might. But what he does know, what they do know, is that whenever you dilute salt, let's say in water, too much, you lose it personally. It has no more effect whenever it's diluted too much. And so that's his question, is what would happen if salt is no longer salty? Well, it's useless. If salt is no longer salt, then it's good for nothing. And so you are the salt of the earth. But if you aren't salty anymore, if you have lost your saltiness, then you have no purpose. You are good for nothing. And that's a harsh reality, isn't it? But that's what I understand Jesus to be saying here. You're useless. But we are salt. That's our identity. And as salt, our purpose is to hinder the decay of this world. Our purpose is to bring Jesus into every part of the earth that we are. It's talking about our influence. Jesus is saying we're going to influence the world. But our influence depends on us being distinctive from and not identical to the world. See, a lot of times when people look at Christians, people that proclaim the name of Christ, I'll put it that way, when the world looks at people who proclaim the name of Christ, they don't see anything different than the rest of the world. One of the most clear pictures of this is the divorce rate. I am a firm believer that the ideal is no divorce. That's the ideal. And I think Christians should be shooting for that ideal, and so you would think that in theory there would be less divorce in the church than in the rest of the world. But stats don't prove that. Our divorce rate is the same as the world. Now, this isn't saying that, divorce is the unpardonable sin and that if you've been divorced, it's shame on you. No, not at all. We grieve with you in that divorce. We recognize that divorce is a horrible cross to bear, and it's a hard thing for everybody involved. So this is not a shame on those who have gone through it. This is more so an understanding of, look, when the world looks at us, are we really that different? Let me illustrate it another way. I like food, and I especially like my potatoes. I can eat my potatoes just about any way, okay? But let's go with a baked potato. I like a good baked potato. Whenever I go to Texas Roadhouse, that's just the one that I have is the baked potato. They do a great job on there. You want to know partly why? It's because they just lather that thing up with salt. I'm thinking this is a great illustration, but let's say I get my potato and it's bland. There's nothing on it. There's no kitchen sink thrown in here. There's no cheese. There's no sour cream. There's no salt. There's nothing else. It's just a potato. They cut it open and that's it. Have you ever had one of those potatoes? Those aren't good. Okay, so if I were to season my salt, if I wanted to make my potato better, what if I grabbed over to my wife's plate and grabbed her French fries and threw it on my potato? That wouldn't be refined. A different form of potato isn't going to make the potato better. Just because it's the same thing, it's just in a different form. A lot of times as a church, that's what we have tried to propose to the world. We'll be a French fry in a potato world. We're going to look a little bit different, but in all reality, we're going to taste the same. We're going to be the same. But that's a problem. Because we weren't called to be the French fry in a potato world. We were called to be salt that can bless both the French fries and the potatoes. Okay, I'm going to leave that illustration aside because y'all are probably hungry at this point, and I just need to move on. But the thing is, we have not been called to just be a better version of the world. But way too many Christians have considered themselves to be just that. We need to just be a better version of the world. No. Our influence depends upon our distinctiveness from the world. That we look different and we are different because the church is different. Because our Jesus is different. Truly counterculture idea rather than conforming to the patterns of the world, as Romans might say. But salt isn't the only identity marker that's in this passage. Continues on. Verse 14, you are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that can't be hidden. So first, our identity is we're salt. Our second one is, we're light. You are light. Again, this is an emphatic statement. Now, in the gospel, in John's gospel, Jesus will say that he said, I am the light. So Jesus will say, I am the light, but John is focusing on I am statements of Jesus for a reason. In Matthew's gospel, he has Jesus saying, you are the light. And sometimes that can be a question of discrepancy or a question of what's going on here. The thing is, neither am I wrong. Jesus is the light, and because Jesus is the light, Jesus' followers are also the light. So there's no discrepancy here. It's just what we are. It is our identity. It is who we are. Again, Jesus doesn't say, he doesn't have the question, hey, who would like to be light? Here's a sign-up list for everyone that would like to be light and a sign-up list for everyone that would like to be salt, and then we'll talk to you afterwards. We'll get together, we'll have some meetings about what it means to be light, and we'll even do some tips and tricks on not being too bright, but also being bright enough. The reason I bring that up is because I just had to buy a new garage light, and I was looking at how many lumens. And I'm like, okay, so do I, and what I liked is they put lumens in layman's terms. Like, do you want like just a sidewalk, easy lighting, or do you want a football stadium lighting? Those were literal terms on these light boxes, and I was like, this is fantastic. I want football stadium. Man, I wanted to light up my driveway like crazy to where everyone driving by, they're like, I ain't gonna stop at that house. That is a safe place. No damage there. I love that kind of idea, but that's not, Jesus isn't saying, well, we're going to have different gradients of light for different situations, and there might be some that aren't light within my following. No. He says, all of you are light. The question is, are you going to function as light? So what's the function of light? Well, this is really simple. We know this one. If you ever walk into a dark room, what you do, most typically, is go to a light switch. If you don't have a light switch or you can't find the light switch, you pull out your phone that has a flashlight, right? Or something like that. You're pulling up anything to give you some light because it dispels darkness. That's what light does. All light does is dispel darkness. Now, it's essential for life. I mean, it's one of the first things, it's actually the very first thing that we hear God saying is, let there be light. That's the first part of creation. Let there be light. And we need light. We need light to function and survive. But let's think of ancient culture before modern day conveniences like electricity, where we can just go flip on a switch and lights will come on any time of day whenever we want it. In their culture, is mostly sun, moon, stars, and then fire. Those are your options for light. Maybe a few other places, but sun, moon, stars, and fire. And so when they needed light, it was a process to go through it. And it was needed. Because if they didn't have the access to something, and they would understand darkness, I think better than we do. You see, we have things called light pollution. We have so much light coming from our area that you actually can't see God's lights as much. That's one of the pains to me of living in town in a place as big as Sherman. As I grew up out in the middle of nowhere, literally it's called no man's land for a reason. That's where I grew up. And not only did I grow up in that place, I grew up 11 miles from civilization. People talk about going to these state parks and going to these different things to see the Milky Way. I saw the Milky Way every night. I also saw my neighbors about 20 miles away every night. I mean, you could see forever. You could see any light because it's a dark place out there. But if you are able to be the light in darkness, it shines through. July 13th, 1977. Time magazine titled a night that happened as a night of terror. On that night, there was a blackout in New York City. Lightning had struck a part of the transformer, and basically most of the city was in blackness on that one night. And there were so many things going on. Mobs would broke windows in the stores and just caused so much havoc. On one night, 4,500 people were arrested and some $61 million worth of damage happened one night because it was dark. That's what happens in a world of darkness. But what happens in a world of spiritual darkness? See, the world is shrouded by darkness. That's what the devil wants to bring, is darkness into this world. Because whenever there's darkness, we feel like we can hide things. We can hide our sin, but the light exposes. When there's darkness, we feel like we can get by with stuff, but the light exposes. We live in a world that is shrouded in thick darkness, but you are the light. You are the light to point people to their way home. Christians are here to point the way back to God. In fact, following on, verse 50, no one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. Implication here is I cannot conceal the light of identity of who I am. I can try, but I never should. That Jesus says, you are light. It should not even cross my mind to put a basket over this light. But the problem is that is what we do so often. We often hide or conceal our identity in Christ. We don't want the world to know exactly who we are, so we try to taint it. We try to tint it more so. We try to hide it. A guy by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a preacher, well-known preacher during the Nazi regime, really against Hitler and all that, he wrote a statement that I think is powerful. He says, a community of Jesus which seeks to hide itself has ceased to follow him. Now, he's calling out his fellow Christians that are hiding out their Christianity. But this also applies to a community of believers that might be together, that the community at large may not even know who we are. That if we seek to hide ourselves, we have ceased to follow Jesus. So what does Jesus expect of us when he calls us light? Well, the expectation is to shine. To shine. Shine on. And don't let anything hinder you from shining. So he talks about baskets, and so I want to continue using that, understanding that we have baskets that get in the way of the light shining. First basket that we need to remove in order to let the light shine is indifference. There should be no such thing as an indifferent or uncaring disciple of Jesus. If you don't care that there are lost souls, not just around the world, but there are lost souls in your neighborhood, in this community, in this county, in North Texas, in this state, in this country, in this world, if you don't care that there are lost souls, I'm just going to say you're following Jesus wrong. Because if you are light and that is darkness, you can't help but want to shine into it if you understand your identity. So we need to remove the basket of indifference. We also need to remove the basket of fear. A lot of times we don't let our light shine because we're afraid. We're afraid of what someone else may think of us. We're afraid of the implications it might have in our relationships, maybe our job. We're afraid of so many things. And often that's what we hide behind is our fears. And we have all these baskets that we put over our lights so that we can still say, I'm shining, but just no one's seeing. Here's the deal. If you're shining and no one's seeing, you're also doing it wrong. If you're letting fear stop you from shining on, remember, Jesus cast out all fear. That's for a purpose, for a reason. Next basket that we need to remove is the one of insulation. I feel like I need to explain this one, but lights don't shine simply for other lights. They don't just shine to illuminate one another. They shine to dispel darkness. So about 100 miles south of where Jesus was teaching, there's a place, it's called the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea, because there's so much salt in it, its saltiness, it would kill a lot of the life that would normally be in there, which is an interesting side note for the understanding of being salt and light of what that can look like. But out on the cliffs of the Dead Sea, there lived a community of people that had withdrawn from the wicked world. They called themselves the Essenes, which the irony of that is their title meant the sons of light. And their whole purpose was to escape from the rest of the world so that they could let their light shine, which is weird because lights are meant to dispel darkness. I say it's weird until I realize that probably the place that most people shine their light on a given basis is Sunday morning. So I guess we're not tons different. We all gather within four walls, and we let our light shine for the glory of God, and then we go out the rest of our week, and we kind of put the basket over our head. And we think, hey, I'm letting my light shine. Things are good. Now, this is a place to let your light shine. Please don't hear that. Like, yeah, let your light shine here. But don't let it stop. You see, right here, we might have this high-powered beam going on, but whenever we go into the rest of the community, we are entering to some dark places that need the light of Jesus to shine in that place. So when you remember who you are, you can't help but live up to your identity. No basket will get in your way. Nothing can stop you. Jesus concludes this little section by talking about what that light looks like in influence. He says, in the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. The light is our good deeds that we do in this world. That when we enter into a place, people should feel a blessing from us. When we come into a community organization, a community gathering, we come into a restaurant or whatever, we should be bringing the salt, the spiritual salt, into this community. When we head out for lunch, and I love bringing up this illustration because a lot of us go out to eat for lunch, and I've heard from multiple waitresses and waiters that the worst day of the week for them to work is Sunday lunch, because those Christians who just came out of church feel entitled and are some of the biggest jerks that they deal with all week. That's straight from the people that you're going to see. We're not bringing the salt and light in those situations. We are being salty and lit in that situation, right? Not the right kind of place. We need to, when we walk in, I would love it if locally, our restaurants, whenever we walk in, they're like, oh man, thank goodness the church crowd is here. Because I always feel such a blessing talking to them. Every one of them asks me how I'm doing. They begin to know my name. They know that I have kids, and they ask about my kids. They know the things about me. They shine light in a way that just is contagious. You see, when that's who you are, it's what God has called out in you. And it really does make a difference in this world. You are salt and you are light. The world is decaying and it needs salt. The world is dark and it needs light. The world needs you. And I want you to think about that just for a second. If you've ever questioned your worth in this world, I just want you to think about the people, not who would miss you if you were gone. That's a way of saying it, but more so, how much would they miss your salt in the conversations that you have? How much would your neighbors miss you and the influence that you bring into the neighborhood? How much more darkness would there be in your little piece of the world if you weren't there? And it's not an arrogance that I'm talking about of saying, man, my community would miss me. It's not even about me. I do these things for the glory of God. I let my light shine through the good works so that others may see what's happening and glorify God. Whenever I don't do my job, there's more people missing out on God, and God entrusts me to be his ambassador, his light, and his salt. He has put so much worth into you and your identity. He loves you that much. And so this morning, I want you to take that identity with you, to take it beyond the walls of this building. I know that Jesus said this in a Sermon on the Mount, and I wondered how many people walked away from that sermon, like so many of us will walk away from a sermon saying, oh, that was a good sermon, and then do nothing about it. I challenge you this week, be salt, be light. live into your identity that has been called out of you in Christ Jesus. And if you need prayers, or if you want to have that identity with him by making him your Lord and Savior and becoming one of his children of the King, then we welcome you through the waters of baptism. Whatever you might need, the moment is open. Would you let it be known as we stand and sing together?